We have a pretty full evening planned for us tonight that we've planned for tonight. I'm Dylan Sussman from Dodson and Flinker, and we have a couple other members of our staff here tonight. Would you guys introduce yourself, please?
I'm Peter Flinker.
Tia, Jack, Aishwarya.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name's Tia Novak.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aishwarya Kulkarni.
And I'm Jack Sweeney Taylor. Nice to meet you.
Well, we're the consulting team for the project, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that works and how that came to be. So, Peter, can you go to the next slide? So, I think probably many of you have been on Zoom before, and in case you need a reminder, please turn your camera on for this meeting. It's the best we can do to feel like we're all together and having the same experience and working on the same thing. Please mute yourself during the presentation portion. If you're on a phone, you can do that by pressing *6. If you need technical help, please send a chat to myself, Dylan Sussman, or to Tia Novak. You can do that at the bottom of your screen by pressing the chat button and then entering a message and sending a direct message to either of us. Next slide. So our plan tonight is to have about 10 minutes for welcome. Right after this slide, if anybody from any of the people, officials from Essex or Manchester, want to say anything to welcome us here, that'd be great. Then we'll have a presentation of backgrounds, project backgrounds, the results of survey and existing conditions analysis. Then we're going to break out into small groups and spend about 50 minutes discussing the strengths and weaknesses of the Essex and Manchester project areas and your ideas for improvements. And then we'll come back together again for 25 minutes to have a report out and discussion. And then 5 minutes to wrap things up. I have to say right now that our presentation might go a little longer than 30 minutes. We have a lot of information that we've gathered so far that we want to share with you guys. So are there any officials from Essex or Manchester who want to welcome us tonight?
Well, I'm not an official, but I'm Sue Brown. I'm the town planner in Manchester, and I just would really like to thank everyone in Manchester that responded to the outreach and has taken the time to join us, because what we're really trying to do is to find ways that we can strengthen our downtown businesses, and we know how important that is for the whole of our town. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and I know others will be watching at other times. We've had some folks say they couldn't join us tonight, but they'd watch at another time. So thank you on behalf of Manchester.
I'm Jeff Bodman Turner. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Thanks for joining us, Jeff. All right, Peter, next slide.
Dylan, I was waiting to see if there was any other. I can't see everyone's face here, but I'll speak on behalf of Essex then. This is Matt Coogan. I'm the town planner for Essex. I'm Sue's counterpart, and together she and I put together a successful application to get local rapid relief program technical assistance, and we were partnered with Dodson and Flinker. So we've been at it now for a little over a month. Maybe we start maybe in early April. I think we maybe kicked off. And Dylan and Peter and the team have been, they've done site visits. They'll be showing you a lot of background on what they're looking at in the town. And then this is the first public meeting of a thorough public process that will have focus groups and a lot more outreach with our downtown communities. And then eventually they'll have some recommendations for us going forward. And I think that, a lot of this is about recovery, but it's also about being a resilient downtowns going into the future. And I'll just plug another program that Sue and I and the other towns of Cape Ann, Rockport, and Gloucester have all worked together through the Cape Ann Chamber. And we have additional funding available through the chamber to directly help our small businesses. So that's going to be rolling out as well. So stay tuned for more information on that. But again, this project is a state program, so we're very focused on the downtowns of Essex and Manchester. We work together in order to get the funding, and we're also looking at other opportunities to help our downtowns and our small businesses in the coming months as well. So thank you all for coming. I'm glad this is going to be recorded because I know a lot of folks are ramping up for Memorial Day and the official kickoff of, the crazy season. So, hopefully people will be able to watch this and, we can all work together over the summer. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so as Matt and Sue mentioned, this is.
I'm just going to listen on yours.
Sorry, if you could mute yourselves, please. So this project is part of a state program called the Rapid Recovery Plan Program that was designed to try to help communities and their downtowns and their businesses recover from the impacts of COVID-19. So the primary objectives of the project are to ensure that communities have data-driven plans to aid in COVID-19 recovery efforts, and then also to support the Commonwealth in the collection of standardized baseline data to measure the impacts of COVID. So we've done that latter task and submitted a bunch of baseline data to the state. And we'll be sharing some of that tonight. So for tonight, the objectives are to share the information that we've gathered so far and to create a shared understanding of what's going on in Essex and downtown Essex and downtown Manchester by the Sea. And then to begin to identify ideas for improving the downtowns, which is more your work than ours tonight. So we want to hear what you have to say and what your ideas are. You know these downtowns much better than we as outside consultants ever will. And you know what's possible there and what would be best. So we won't get to the end of identifying ideas for improvement tonight. We'll just begin to do that. And we'll continue to do that over the coming month or month and a half in collaboration with a pretty sizable stakeholder committee that we have for both Essex and Manchester by the Sea. So we've got about 5 to 10 people in each community who are participating and participated in several meetings so far. So there are 3 phases to this project. The first phase is the diagnostic phase, and we're just coming to the end of that. So at the end, we have that public presentation, which is happening right now. The second phase, we develop a list of project recommendations that'll go through, I believe, the middle of July. And then in the final phase, we will write up the final plan and document it all. And there'll be one additional public forum to present the project recommendations. Next slide. So the goal of this is basically to identify shovel-ready projects for implementation to help improve these downtown areas and help businesses recover. And the program has these 6 categories that they expect projects to fall within, or it could be something else. But they're projects related to the public realm, which is things like sidewalk or parks, the private realm, signage, storefronts, etc. Projects related to revenue and sales, that can be marketing. Administrative capacity, that's things like some sort of entity to help manage the downtown, tenant mix, or culture and the arts. So those are some ideas of what kinds of projects have come out of this. And the idea is to develop pretty well developed project ideas that can be applied for future funding and to identify funding opportunities for those. Next slide. You're up, Peter.
So it's I guess it's appropriate for a pandemic project that this first phase is called the diagnostic. So I think, as you'll see, we've discovered a lot of really healthy aspects to both of your communities. And I think far from any real problems. It's really what we're looking for is opportunities to make things even better than they are today. And so it's really fun for us to come and see where you live and where you work and try to understand it. But the first part of that is really to identify the study areas, basically focusing on the core commercial areas of Manchester and Essex. This is the map version of the Manchester by the Sea overview. And so we're basically covering, as I said, the core commercial district from Pine Street over Central Street past Elm, down Union and Beach Street and Summer Street, and the sort of harbor surroundings. So that's really what we're focusing on with the diagnostic, trying to understand how many businesses there are, how much parking, who's doing what, and what could happen in the future. For Essex, it's really focused on the sort of Causeway Center, traditional shipbuilding center. Again, looking at from Southern Avenue up to Western Avenue, and then including Eastern Avenue as it goes out, which really includes quite a few sort of commercial businesses. So those have been incorporated in the study area, and then looking at part of Martin Street, basically down to the library. So the first question of the diagnostic is really, who are the customers of these two study areas? And of course, the most basic customer group is the residents of the two towns in Manchester by the Sea. As you know, you have 5,620 residents, median age of 50.5, and they live in 2,264 households, which is pretty typical, a little bit over 2 persons per household. Median household income, 125,000. Per capita income, about half that. I guess it's a little more than half that. And then a median net worth of 504,000. And then the important thing for business planning, of course, is the disposable income of nearly $100,000 per household. Of course, one of the things we often talk about in planning is the changing demographics as the country ages. And in Manchester by the Sea today, over 35% of the population is over 60. And that is projected to increase to, well, what you see there, 41% by 2030, according to a study by MAPC. So we have a population that's slowly getting older as the baby boom and even the baby boomers' children start to get older. In Essex, we have a smaller population of 3,845, a little bit younger, 45.7, and 1,530 households. Median household income of 113,000, per capita 60,000, and a net worth of 293,000. And then a median disposable income of 87,000. So this is sort of the basic sort of structure of residents who are potential customers of our two study areas. We found this, what's called a tapestry segmentation of the market done by ESRI, which is a national GIS provider, Geographic Information Systems. They make a lot of the mapping software and often also provide services like this. So they actually have divided the socioeconomic structure of the whole country into 67 different groups based on different population characteristics and income, of course. And this is how they would describe Essex, which is a combination of what they call over 1,000 urban chic households, and then about 500 Pleasantville households. And as you see described there, the urban chic are people with a sophisticated lifestyle. They're busy and well-connected, middle-aged, I guess, at 43, and half of all households are married couples and 30% are singles. Pleasantville are older people, typically empty nesters, single-family dwellers with dual incomes, have high home values because they've probably been living those homes for a while, and they're sport and movie enthusiasts, internet users, love to shop online or in a variety of stores. So what ESRI has done is basically taken the usual dry categories of income and demographics and tried to reduce them into actual populations of what you see if you go into a community. Obviously, this doesn't define everyone in Essex. It's a very broad sort of take on it. But it's interesting to see, if you look across the country, what they think based on the demographic and economic characteristics of these towns is typical people who live there. Now in Manchester by the Sea, we include the top tier of, this is actually the top of all 67 segments of the population. These are people making something, I think $109,000 as per household per year. It's actually not as high as you would think, but it shows you that, even at 109,000, that's a very, I think it's the top 10% of income in the country. And what they call exurbanites. So obviously the top tier are highly educated people who spend a lot on lifestyle, theoretically. And then the exurbanites are people who are active, maybe not so focused on a luxury lifestyle, but have chosen to live a little bit further out from the city, even though they have a good income. So and then more traditional way of looking at the market is, who's within driving distance of your town centers. So these are two maps also developed based on ESRI data, showing the drive time of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 20 minutes. And this is what, Cumberland Farms and Dunkin' Donuts looks at, in addition to the number of vehicle counts on the passing roads, as to how many people can get to your centers. What I think is probably more important is how Essex and Manchester by the Sea, of course, fit into the regional economy, which is so heavily driven by tourism and second homes and sort of exurban commuters, perhaps, but really focused on the lifestyle of Cape Ann. And so I guess one of the questions we want to think about tonight is what projects and what improvements in Manchester by the Sea and Essex can really take advantage of the sort of regional tourist and seaside economy, and what can we do to improve those conditions to make that a better connection. If we look locally, we also have that on a sort of small scale in Manchester by the Sea. We've heard a lot about people who come up on the train even and by car and park in the downtown and or get off the train and walk to Singing Beach or enjoy the other parks in the area. And of course you have, I'm sure, a lot of people who live in the town who come down to the village and enjoy getting an ice cream cone or dinner and walking around and seeing the wonderful streets there. In Essex, we have also a number of key destinations like the Shipbuilding Museum, Cogswell Grant Museum, the Essex Greenbelt Association headquarters. I think one of the things which we'll talk about is that's a little harder to make those connections on foot, perhaps, from the center. And there may be, I think in both communities, it's a little hard to find out where everything is. So of course, Essex really has a prime spot as a literal crossroads of this part of the area. People going to Crane Beach and passing back and forth have to go through our study area. So the next question on the official Rapid Recovery Program diagnostic is, what's the physical environment of the study areas and how does that meet the needs or not meet the needs of businesses and customers? So what we've done is sort of taken the rubric that the Rapid Recovery Program has given us and sort of gone through a diagnostic of each of those elements. And it's based on sort of two halves. One is the sort of public realm elements, which include the things that are really within the public right-of-way, sidewalks and street trees and lighting, wayfinding and signage, and then the roadbed itself and the crosswalks. And so these are all things that you are in the public domain and you have some control over. And then within the private realm, you have what's happening on the buildings. So storefront windows, displays, and signage. Part of the state rubric is looking at, do you have awnings covering the entrances? what are the facades like, and what lighting is there on the buildings. So what the state is really interested in is identifying where does a particular downtown or village center fit into this sort of understanding of the public realm and the private realm as two really interrelated and important parts of making a downtown work. And so I'll go through both of the towns fairly quickly. I should say that we're presenting a lot of information tonight, and it's going to go by in kind of a blur. All of this information will be available. I think we'll make the PowerPoint from tonight available, but more importantly, there'll be a detailed report that'll go with all of our recommendations, which will be available as well. So all of this information will be accessible to you. So in Manchester by the Sea, we have sidewalks, which of course are fairly narrow, but they're continuous and well connected, pretty well maintained and accessible, but with fairly limited space for display and outdoor dining, not to mention street trees and furnishings. Street trees themselves, because of that limited space, there's not a lot of them. There's one in probably the public right-of-way in front of the post office, a few others that have been planted, but most of the major trees are in the front yards, either of institutions like the library or in private home front yards. But it still has quite a nice feeling because the street is so narrow, the yards are close together. Relatively few benches that we could identify. That may be because we were out there in April, but there didn't seem to be a lot of places to set down. Lighting is sort of a combination of the sort of traditional Cobra head street lights and then historic style street lights on the lower part of Beach Street and Summer Street that were installed as part of streetscape improvements some years ago. But really the greatest thing about Manchester by the Sea is that all the utilities, most of the utilities are buried. So you don't have something interfering with the view of that wonderful historic character. In terms of wayfinding and signage, there's a lot of well-designed signs which reflect the character of the sort of historic buildings. There's some attractive sort of group signs for some of the business centers, but very limited wayfinding signage. So if you're just driving into town, not so easy to find out where to park, not so easy to find out where key destinations are. Maybe that's part of the fun of exploration. But I think obviously knowing where to go can really help attract and make your visitors comfortable. In terms of the roadbed, of course, it's a relatively narrow road. It's winding, it's sort of laid out, back when people didn't have cars and maybe didn't have horses. There was a walking back and forth to work, but that's part of its charm, right? We could probably spend a whole nother presentation talking about why a community like this is so wonderful. But part of it is the curving roads that give you a sense of enclosure. You get a sense of unveiling of the views and the different buildings as you go through. And it just has a really wonderful, you explore these places, you can't see them all at once. And that's part of what makes them wonderful. There are a fairly limited number of crosswalks, but they're well marked. And of course, on-street parking, because it's so narrow, is at a premium. In terms of the parking inventory, this is sort of a first cut. We'll be going over this in more detail with planning staff and others. But about 725 spaces were identified. You see the on-street parking in blue, private parking in orange, and public parking in yellow. So pretty well distributed parking. But again, not that easy to find your way around where you're supposed to park. And of course, it's not very well connected. So that's something that we'll talk about as we go forward. In terms of the private realm, Manchester by the Sea, thinking about windows and awnings and other aspects of the facade, there's obviously a pretty high level of ground floor transparency, a lot of glass, a lot of visibility between that glass. Don't have a lot of tinting, which can sort of block the view. A lot of store owners have created attractive displays. So it's interesting to walk around and look in and on. A majority of sort of well maintained historic buildings. Not a lot of awnings, but I don't think that's anything against the town. It's really a lot of other things that the different buildings are designed with to have covered entrances and basically do the same things as traditional awnings, but in sort of various architectural ways. In terms of outdoor display and dining, as we said, limited room for outdoor dining on sidewalks within the right of way. There's cafe seating at several sort of private yards and private plazas, and some temporary outdoor seating for COVID has been established, I guess, last season and perhaps again this season. But one of the things that we want to talk about is how do we deal with that going forward? How do we balance parking versus room for people to do things other than park? In Essex, turning to that, sidewalks again are pretty continuous throughout most of the study area. There are quite a few places where the sidewalk space is sort of shared, at least temporarily, with cars pulling in and out of parking spaces. And there is also limited space because it's a narrow right-of-way for dining and outdoor display and street trees and furnishings. And in fact, pretty much continuously where you have telephone poles, they take up 18 inches of the sidewalk, which is not always so great if you're walking in a group and suddenly have to shift and go around. Street trees and benches. Again, street trees are few and far between. Again, probably the best trees are in private yard spaces. And then benches, there have been a number of efforts to install some benches, but they primarily between the sort of the restaurant row and Martin Street, where some of those have been installed. Lighting, again, pretty much entirely dependent on Cobra Head street lights. There's a few, as on the front of the brewery, that have sort of architectural lighting, but for the most part, it's sort of that high street lights and then parking lot sort of area floodlights. And then the utilities, unfortunately, sort of take up a lot of the view. So as you're looking either up the street or across to the wonderful views, you're sort of looking underneath the wires. In terms of wayfinding signage, there's a real range of signage in Essex. Some really interesting historical signage, some historical recreations, some run-of-the-mill sort of convenience store style signage, but it's not inconsistent with the character of the place. A lot of these, like Manchester, we didn't see a lot of wayfinding signage or much of any, or directions to parking or other key places. There is one wonderful Essex Heritage sort of kiosk sign at the center of the causeway, which of course really adds, I think, to that streetscape. It gives people some direction of what's going on, but mostly talking about the larger region and some of the key destinations like the museum are on there, which is great. In terms of the public realm in Essex, continue to sort of roadbed and crosswalks, fairly busy 2-lane highway, I think 14,000 to 16,000 trips per day, limited on-street parking in the center. Well, there's some on-street parking at the two ends, and relatively few crosswalks, but seem to cover the sort of major destinations. In terms of the inventory of parking spaces, about 915 parking spaces overall, some on-street parking, but primarily it's private parking lots. And then I think there's a town lot on the west end. But again, primarily focused on, you have a destination in mind, you go and you park in that private parking lot, and relatively few areas where visitors can go if they're not sure what their destination is. In terms of the private realm in Essex, a big range of sort of facade types, building types, sort of traditional sort of houses that have been converted into shops, houses with shop fronts that were built, barns and sheds, and what I would sort of call an eclectic restaurant style along the causeway. Relatively small number, I think about 50 businesses and maybe 12 of them actually face the sidewalk and sort of open up in a traditional shop front. And many of the others sort of turn their backs on the sidewalk. And that's something we want to talk about as to whether there's a way to make those sidewalks more comfortable and welcoming. Because of course, if you're looking at parking lots in the backside of buildings, that's not necessarily the most interesting walking experience, and people will tend to stop and turn around. In terms of outdoor display and dining, again, here's the point I just made, that relatively few businesses are, how we would say, actively engaging the sidewalk. Primarily those are sort of the antiques and other stores. And a lot of the others are sort of facing away, obviously, to face the beautiful view of the river and the marshes. And certainly nothing wrong with that. But the question is, how can we combine that with a more lively frontage? And some, like the new brewery, sort of have both. So there's some openings, there's a deck, a dining area facing the sidewalk, and then a lot more in the back. Just finishing up this section, I want to talk about sense of place, because we have this sort of statewide rubric that we're applying to look at the character and quality of the sort of functional qualities of these downtowns. But I think what's really extraordinary about both Manchester by the Sea and Essex is the sense of this unique sense of place that you get when you're there. And that's really a combination of, again, those sort of winding historic streets, the beautiful big trees and the framing of the beautiful historic buildings. And then just the fact that you have all these different activities clustered in a small area with a wonderful train station and the ability to sort of walk throughout this whole place. And then, of course, get down to the beautiful waterfront. And in Essex, much the same, obviously, extraordinary history of the shipbuilding, the ability of, and the history of those restaurants, and the sort of ongoing opportunity that's provided for visitors to enjoy seafood and in this wonderful ambiance of the waterside. And then, of course, the tradition of the sort of antique markets and that activity in these historic buildings. All of which, so for both these places, that they're there. And so what we want to do going forward is really reinforce that to, again, make it something that preserves the resources that are providing that, but also takes advantage of those to keep a healthy economy. So some of the placemaking opportunities that sort of we see and we want to talk about, first is to take advantage of the unique cultural and natural assets. I think there's already been a lot of discussion of making better connections to some of those surrounding areas. But I think that, again, is sort of connecting that sense of place to the activities that are rooted in that place. And then, to build on that extraordinary sense of place and the sense of authenticity you have, because there's a lot of new places that are trying to manufacture charm, but here you have charm that's authentic. And, as you know, that's a rare thing and something to be celebrated and really, as I say here, to expand opportunities for people to engage with that. That's what people are looking for. They don't want to go to the mall. They don't want to go someplace that they can find anywhere in the country. So to come to someplace that is really authentic, that still has that wonderful flavor, literally and figuratively, is a great opportunity. And then, doing it for the gram, right? I think that's a lot of what our lifestyles are about now, are going to interesting places and then sharing that. So how can we make that sort of Instagram, Facebook culture something which works really well without making it a fake, but taking advantage of the fact that, wow, I'm in this wonderful place and I want to share that, is a great opportunity. So turn it back over to Dylan to talk about the third aspect, which is the business environment.
You go to the next slide, Peter. So just to give a quick overview, obviously there have been significant business impacts in both Manchester by the Sea and in Essex. And we'll get into some of the details from a survey of business owners that was done as association with this project. So most of the businesses in the area suffered some sort of loss of temporary closure, a loss of revenue, reduced hours, reduced capacity, and so on. In Manchester by the Sea, it appears that there was one permanent business closure. That's all we've found so far. And there was one business that relocated to Essex, so that's Cuttlefish. It seems like there are two storefronts that are currently vacant in Manchester by the Sea, so that's a pretty low vacancy rate and indicates general health of the downtown area. Essex, there was one permanent business closure that we're attributing to COVID. It had other factors there, but it seems like COVID was probably a significant one. And there are about 6 storefronts currently vacant in Essex. Of those 6, a number of them were vacant before COVID and have other factors like, being in estate probate or being generally dilapidated or something like that. So again, Essex, in terms of vacancy rate, is doing pretty well. Next slide. So there was a survey done that went out to businesses in the area. Peter, can you go to the next slide? And 18 businesses responded from Essex and 11 responded from Manchester by the Sea. You can see that a large percentage of the businesses are pretty small. So in Essex, 45% are less than 5 employees, 5 or less. In Manchester by the Sea, 64% are 5 employees or less. In the range of businesses that responded generally reflect the kinds of businesses that are in these districts. So the biggest category in Essex were retail and food services and accommodation. And in Manchester by the Sea, 55% were in retail, and then about 20% in personal services, and then the remainder in food service, finance, insurance, and healthcare. Next slide. Oh, one of the striking things that we saw in the survey respondents, which again reflects the conditions of these districts, is that in Essex, 22% of the businesses rent their space while 78% own, where more than the opposite is true in Manchester by the Sea, where 91% of the businesses rent and 9% own. So that has some implications for sort of how these districts function. In Essex, you have business owners who are also property owners. That gives them the flexibility to make investments in their properties, but it also probably means that they have a pretty big, some of them have a big mortgage or loan that they're carrying. In Manchester by the Sea, the business owners are more dependent on the property owners to make investments in those properties. So in both communities, the revenues declined significantly for many businesses. Prior to COVID, businesses were seeing an increase in revenue. And if you go to the next slide, Peter. And then during COVID, there was a significant decline in business revenue. So 67% of the businesses in Essex generated less revenue, and 81% of the businesses in Manchester by the Sea generated less revenue. That's based on the sample we have. And there's some of those are pretty significant. So 36% of the businesses in Manchester by the Sea responded, said they decreased 75 to 100% in revenue. And 17% in the same category in Essex. Interestingly, there are some businesses that reported increased revenue. So 28% of the businesses in Essex reported increased revenue and 9% in Manchester by the Sea. So what you see is that the kind of business and how the business responded had a big impact on how COVID impacted them. If you're a business that really depended on in-person clients and you just simply were not able to see them, you were really hammered. If you were a business that could shift to what people wanted during COVID, like takeout food, you probably still saw some loss and had to make a big investment to change your business over, but you might have had some stabilized revenue. Next slide. Not surprisingly, there was less foot traffic in both areas. This information is all available in a report that's available on the town websites. So you can go see the details there. Next slide. And then, there are wide-ranging impacts with almost 100% of businesses in both places reporting some impacts, ranging from declining revenues to employee layoffs to reduced operating hours, needing to stop making mortgage or rent payments, incurring more expenses for safety measures, or changing the way you do business and what you sell. So at the time of the survey, which is about a month ago when it closed, 72% of the businesses reported they were operating at reduced capacity in Essex, and 55% reported that in Manchester by the Sea. So there were still ongoing impacts and probably will continue to be for quite a while. Next slide. Looking at the satisfaction of the business owners with the commercial districts, you can see that generally the business owners are, they're kind of in the middle in both communities. They're slightly more satisfied in Manchester by the Sea than in Essex, but in neither community are the business owners saying, this is terrible, this is awful. So that's a good thing. And the categories there are public spaces, streets and sidewalks, private buildings, storefronts and signs in the second one, and then access for customers and employees in the third. Next slide. And then again, in terms of safety and comfort for customers, employees, and proximity to complementary businesses and uses, business owners are, on the green side, on the happy side of both communities. Next slide. When you look at the regulatory environment, or when you ask about the regulatory environment, there's more of a difference. So in Essex, 71% of businesses indicated that the regulatory environment poses an obstacle to business operation. The biggest categories there were licensing and permitting regulations, and zoning and parking regulations, which is part of zoning. In Manchester by the Sea, 45% of businesses indicated that the regulatory environment posed an obstacle. Again, parking was the biggest issue in Manchester by the Sea. Next slide. When asked about what kind of strategies business owners thought they would like to receive assistance on, the biggest opportunities business owners in Essex saw were participating in shared marketing and advertising, financing for, just want to make sure this slide is correct. Yep. Low-cost financing for storefront improvements or facades improvements, and training in the use of social media. And then in Manchester by the Sea, it was participating in shared marketing or advertising, online sales or other online sales channels, and training in the use of social media. Now, this is pretty good news because, as Matt mentioned earlier, the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce received a grant called the Cape Ann Comeback Grant, and it is targeted at most of these things. So it doesn't deal with financing for storefront and facade improvements, which is a priority for some businesses in Essex, but it does deal with shared marketing, advertising, online sales, and training in social media. So that indicates that Cape Ann Chamber and their partners knew what was needed, and they were able to get the funding to help make that happen. And so with this project, we'll be looking at what other things we can do to support the businesses. Next slide. Okay, and then this is our final category before we move into closing this up and going to breakout groups. So next slide. This is looking at administrative capacity, which is things like who are the stewards of the area, what's the regulatory environment, and do we need some discussion of district management. So in Manchester by the Sea and in Essex, the key stewards are the property owners, the businesses, the town government. Both communities have some form of merchants group, and then again, the Chamber of Commerce, the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce. So what we've heard so far is that there needs to be some person or group to coordinate sustained efforts to improve business conditions in Manchester by the Sea. And then on the regulatory side, it doesn't seem like the businesses that we've spoken to so far see regulations and permitting as a major barrier to their success. They feel generally well supported by the town. There's been some discussion about zoning being a barrier, but on the other hand, people seem to recognize that the physical constraints, the tightness of the downtown and how built out it is more of a barrier than the zoning. And even if the zoning was changed, it seems like not much would be possible. Next slide. In Essex, they're the same kind of key stewards, including the Essex Merchant Group. One of the key issues there is that the capacity of the Essex Merchant Group may be reduced in the future due to the loss of town funding and also a loss of dues, because some businesses have not been able to pay their dues because they're hurting, as we saw earlier. So it seems like in Essex, again, there's some need for a body to help coordinate and move the area forward. Regulations, as I said earlier, are more of a barrier and more of an issue, according to business owners and stakeholders in Essex. On the plus side, there was mixed use zoning that recently passed for the downtown area in Essex. That's been a long time coming, and I think is welcome. And then there are concerns in particular about entertainment licensing policy in Essex. Next slide. So overall, it seems like the preliminary key issues that we're hearing about are the seasonal economy in both of these communities. So what we've heard from business owners is that they make it through the winter, mostly local business, but it's the summer when they really make their money. And so that seasonal economy can be pretty hard to deal with. Access and parking is an issue in both places. Strengthening connections between the parts of downtown appears to be an issue in Essex, and maybe an issue in Manchester. Improving connections to open spaces that draw visitors like the beaches or the marsh is an opportunity in both communities. Climate change and sea level rises are obviously issues in both communities. The public realm of storefronts, sidewalks, street landscaping, et cetera, is more of a concern in Essex than Manchester. Housing affordability is an issue in both communities. As people are priced out, you have less people able to afford your businesses, to shop at your businesses. And also there's an issue with businesses being able to retain and recruit employees who may not be able to afford to live in these communities. There's a desire to expand the customer base in both communities, possibly a need to broaden the business mix in both communities, and then employer recruitment is definitely an issue that's up for many businesses right now. Next slide. All right, so that's the end of our presentation. What we're going to do now is we're going to break out into groups. Each group will have a facilitator and a note taker, and also somebody who's going to be designated as a person to do a report out. So we're going to separate into one group for Essex, one group for Manchester by the Sea. I'm going to be with the Essex group. Peter is going to be with the Manchester by the Sea group. So Tia will open the breakout groups. Please select the appropriate group for yourself. And then we'll talk for a while. And then the breakout groups will automatically close, and we'll come back to discuss together to try to find the commonalities between these two communities and their differences. Any questions before we open the breakout groups?
Probably we should say, Dylan, if anybody has any particular questions or comments on what we presented, they could chat them and we could answer them later. Who should they chat to?
They should chat to me.
All right.
Tia, the host.
Tia is ready to take your questions.
All right. So are there any questions before we start the breakout groups? All right, here we go.
Well, welcome to the Manchester by the Sea breakout group. Maybe we should talk about something before time runs out. So, and if you could also turn on your cameras if you're willing and able, so we can see who you are. I guess the first question.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know why it's not turning on, but sorry. Ah, there it is, and it's
There
dark.
you are. You should have in the lower left-hand corner, there should be a start and stop video button if you float your cursor down there.
Okay.
So yeah, we'd like to get to know you a little bit briefly. If you could say when you're answering the first question, if you could tell us first how you're connected to downtown Manchester by the Sea, either as a business owner or a resident or a visitor, and then what draws you or your customers to the downtown and what makes the downtown special in your mind. We talked about a lot of things in the presentation, but what in your mind really draws people, either you or other visitors, to the downtown? Anybody want to start?
Well, Peter, you did a great job of describing Manchester for somebody who's never been here or has only been here a couple of times. I think that was very impressive, and obviously you're a competent planner. My relationship with the downtown is I've lived in town for 40 years or so. I own a building in downtown. I have the headquarters of my business is in the building, and I also own a building. The same building has 7 apartments, affordable apartments upstairs. So I have a certain affinity. I'm on the downtown improvement, and the thing I'd like you to solve for me, if you can do it, and you're going to have to think about this, we need public restrooms in downtown Manchester. That's what tourists want. And if you do a survey, I happen to have done a survey. It's a competing survey to your survey, except I got everybody to respond. I didn't get 11 people to respond. I got everybody to respond. And the number one issue is we need to have, when somebody walks in to the dress shop or the whatever it is, the restaurant, and says, can I use your bathroom? I'm not a customer, but can I use your bathroom? Everybody goes, no, we don't allow that. You have to go somewhere else. Go away. I think our businesses would be more successful if we could have a welcoming environment. And part of that welcoming environment is, as they do in France, if you've been to France, they have pissoirs, and I think we need to get on the ball and address that issue, so that an entity that isn't required by law to provide rest facilities can say, yes, down at Reed Park or over at the town hall, there are facilities. And I'm keeping it simple. Not that I think you're stupid. You're obviously not.
Well,
but that's my speech tonight.
Everybody who knows me knows that keeping it simple is a good idea. And you've successfully jumped to the second question, which is what are the weaknesses of the downtown? So I guess the next person who volunteers, again, if you could sort of say what your connection is, and then you can either say, what do you think draws you or other people to the downtown, or what do you think is needed, or what are the weaknesses? A two-part question. Who wants to go next?
I'm Glenn from the Alley's Beach Street Cafe. We are the de facto public restroom in Manchester. Everybody knows. I don't really want to talk too much about restrooms. It's not, polite conversation to have in public, but he's got a very, very good point, and it would solve a lot of issues with the downtown. Don't personally have a problem with it. Not very happy taking care of the public restrooms in Manchester by the Sea, but I could use a little help. It would be nice. That's my connection. We have a cafe in downtown Manchester. We turn about 1,000 people a week during off season, and we do about 2,000 to 2,500 people Like this time of year, we're starting to do out there. So we are like the downtown restroom in Manchester by the Sea. Not unhappy with that job, but we could use a little help. Great way to start a conversation.
Yeah. Important things.
Yeah.
Who's next? Sonia?
Well, I work for the town administrator in the town hall, so I'm an employee. So, and I'm not,
wonderful one.
thank you, Becky. I'm not a resident of Manchester, so even though I've worked there for 3 years, so I think that obviously the beauty of the town and the natural resources and the downtown mix are all very attractive to me. And the weaknesses, because I hear a lot of weaknesses, I get calls, with concerns, and that is parking seems to be a very big issue, obviously. And recently, because of COVID, just the outdoor dining balance and the balance it with the merchants' concerns. That's really, as Becky can attest and the selectmen can attest, that's been a challenge, but it's a recent challenge. But still, that's what we're here for.
Great, thanks. Any other volunteers, or I keep asking?
I'll volunteer, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm Becky Jakes. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen, and have been a resident in Manchester for, I guess, almost 27 years now. And what drew my family and me was, in addition to the beauty, it was the sense of community. And I think that Manchester is a place that just people come to and feel comfortable, and it's a place they could belong as well. I think that in terms of parking, I think parking is one of our biggest issues. We do try to deal as best we're able, but I think that if there's some way we could be more creative with parking. I noticed on your map that it showed that some of the public parking was actually owned by the MBTA over by the community center. But parking, and as well as signage. I know that some smaller communities have little placards that you can follow on your main walkways, and it's a little map of what the town has to offer, with signs pointing, you are here. Parking, it shows where designated parking areas are, restaurants, and various merchants. And I don't know if that might be something that could help Manchester.
Great, thank you. Now, Cheryl has cleverly used the Zoom raise hand feature to raise her hand, which I hope indicates she'd like to
I feel like
talk.
I'm a good doobie today. I
Yes.
want to apologize that I'm not on Zoom. I had some surgery today, so I'm not in a very good position to be on Zoom. I have my video, but I'm Cheryl McGuire. I own Madam Haddam Boutique Consignment. We're going into our 8th year now.
Wow.
I'm a transplant from Marblehead. And I see a lot of similarities within the town that I think are really, that I think are great. I also see some similarities that were challenging for both towns. I'd like to just address a few things. One of them being the outside restaurants. I don't know if I'm one of the few retailers, but I do feel like there's more of us that are in complete favor of the outside cafes and the appeal that it has. If I had a dime for every person driving through the center of Manchester last year who had told me they'd never stopped because literally they would blink to drive through the town to get up to Gloucester. But because all the bump outs with the restaurants, they actually saw how vibrant and beautiful Manchester was based upon the activity in the restaurants. And as a result, they ended up stopping where years past it hadn't stopped before. And I thought that was a fantastic thing. With that being said, I can appreciate, I don't really have a dog in this fight because I have my own parking lot and I'm very fortunate for that. And I'm absolutely grateful for that. But I would just think that maybe a collaboration between the restaurants and the retailers. I know we are all huge supporters of one another. I've seen it personally. I love all the restaurants in town. I try to frequent them as much as possible. I don't live in town. So I do my best to make sure that I'm a presence and people see me outside of my own business and frequenting other establishments. I think that's really important for us all to do, especially in a small community. So I'm in favor. I would love to see the restaurants, if they had any, this is an idea, if they had any paper placement, pieces, to have maybe the retailers on all of their placements with that, so it had it in conjunction with their menu. If they could put on the sides all the retail stores, and maybe when you frequent like Alley's or you frequent Cala's or you frequent the Mooring or any of these other restaurants, mention that you ate there and we can do something in return. That's kind of just an idea. If I can make a suggestion with regards to parking, I will tell you, I'm 8 years into this. There is a huge challenge of parking. I don't care so much during the winter months, but I do during the summer months, where there's one particular business, and certainly don't feel like calling them out, but between Beach Street and Laughing Gull, that is occupying 10 spots there for literally days on end in 2-hour parking. And as a result, the overflow of parking for Laughing Gull, for Crosby's, for a bunch of other restaurants are coming, the overflow is coming into our parking lot, which is a private lot. Not to mention, those 10 spots literally are within walking distance of a ton of businesses, retail and restaurants alike. So I will tell you, that is incredibly frustrating for me to see this and see it go on from year to year without any concern from people. That's incredibly frustrating for me to see that. That's, I guess, my 2 cents.
Right, thank you.
I'll speak up if I may, just really quick.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, but I happen to be putting the newspaper to bed at the same time that I'm in this meeting, so forgive my lack of total attention. I'm Erica Brown, and I've lived in town for a little over probably 36, 37 years. Originally from New York. I run the newspaper, the local newspaper. And because of that vantage point, I listen and I hear things. I'm kind of a crossroads of communication. I would definitely agree with what Cheryl just said, which is, I think that there is this feeling or this idea that maybe the restaurants succeed at the expense of retailers and retailers succeed at the expense of restaurants in COVID. Maybe not before COVID, but there was definitely this, and I don't see it, to be honest with you. And I think that the businesses, especially going through COVID, have probably learned to look at each other a little differently in terms of the categories. So I see the appetite to work together to be very, very high. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that should be taken advantage of, because there's this kind of period of time before things might maybe close up again or whatever. But I think that's my observation. I do think that I agree with parking. The bathroom is a perennial issue that I literally listen to every week 25 years ago when I was on the board of the community center. So it is an evergreen. And I think that one thing that has also changed that I've seen with COVID, and by the way, before I move on, the outdoor dining I see as being, I feel that there's this appetite with the town to say, oh, COVID's over, let's change everything back. And the truth is there is this desire, I think, among the public and among the people I talk to allow the restaurants a little time to kind of recoup. So for whatever that's worth. And then the last thing I'll say is that, and this is kind of in the big idea, signage, by the way, what Becky said, big, big, big. That's a big, easy win. For navigability and orientation, and welcoming, a posture of welcoming to people outside of Manchester. And then the last thing I'll say, and this really is the last thing I'll say, this is kind of a big idea, but I've thought that the appetite for, I can sense the appetite for having a walking downtown, a rational walking downtown experience, a rational biking experience downtown, a rational driving experience downtown. And that means perhaps going slower than the dreaded 20 miles an hour in the heart of downtown. And by that, I mean the walking, beautiful downtown village business district. And I'm wondering if maybe seasonally we wouldn't do well by having a one-way from, I'm just going to put it out there, from like School Street down to the beginning of Summer Street, you know, and have maybe half the street a walking promenade type of thing, and that would allow outdoor dining and also at the same time encouraging businesses to stay open later on summer evenings when it's reasonable, maybe Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays. I think that kind of synergy with the restaurants could be excellent and amazing, and that could rise up all boats. There you go. I'm going to go back to my newspaper, but I am listening.
Great.
I'll go next, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm John Round. I am a selectman here in town, and I moved here about 21 years ago from New Jersey. And I will say that we moved here, certainly it was that point in my life where schools were really very much a big factor. And so that was probably the primary factor. But after that, I have to say the charm and ambiance that you've got in Manchester is something you just don't find in very many other communities. And we looked at a lot of other bedroom communities, especially west of Boston, and you know what they all are. And there are a lot of them that really don't have a downtown, much less, of course, a waterfront setting, but a downtown where you can walk around. They've got a bunch of strip malls. They've been kind of invented communities that maybe, you know, they've got some history, but they really don't have a core. And that was very much an attraction for us. And I think it's an attraction for a lot of people that come here every summer and spring and fall, and maybe even a little bit in the winter. But it's a big factor. I was encouraged by the review that you provided an hour or so ago. I think that in general, the selectmen and others here, we're working in the direction that you have presented in terms of what we should be doing in trying to take advantage of our unique assets and building on our authenticity. We just have to be a little bit creative about that. I will mention that parking is critical, and I won't be the last one to mention that. And that's probably been a common theme that you've heard from a number of folks here, and it will continue to be so. I think we're trying to solve some of those problems, and hopefully in the coming months we'll be able to solve it a little bit. But signage was a little bit of a surprise for me, and I also happen to sit on the Historic District Commission, and signage is a topic within the commission almost in every meeting. And it's generally one where we want less signage more than more, but I think we have a meeting coming up Thursday night, and I'm going to comment on that at that meeting. We are trying to reduce the clutter that we see with signs pointing to all kinds of different things all the time in the district, and trying to control that a bit. We realize that many of the merchants, certainly they have to market their wares, and we're aware of that, but we don't want things to go too overboard. But signage in terms of where things are and getting around, I think that's a good idea, because all of these out-of-town folks, I mean, for us, we know where we're going all the time, but they don't. And I know that the Historical Society, for instance, has put together a little an app that can tell you where things are in town that are of historic significance. That's just kind of moving in that direction of telling where things are that they might want to visit. But from a commercial perspective, I think some more signs in the town would be good, and I want to explore that a little bit more in the next several months with the Historic Commission. So that's me.
Thanks.
I can go next.
Yes.
I'm Chris Olney. I was raised here, but I moved away and came back. I'm a member of the Planning Board and the Affordable Housing Trust. And in my checkered job career, I was once the director of the Salem Redevelopment Authority. And I bring that up because one of the things that Salem did that was the biggest impact on the improvement of the downtown was to encourage residential development. And the great thing about people living in the downtown is they don't need parking. They can just walk to the stores and the restaurants, and they're there all the time. So they're captive. And I think we should be encouraging more residential development in the downtown to the extent we can.
Where would you put it?
Put it above the stores, you know, above the Dunkin' Donuts, and there's a whole big stretch of stores along there. It could have 2 or 3 stories above it. Parking underneath, perhaps. There are all kinds of places in the downtown where that could be done.
We have a
Eventually-
huge space behind Town Hall that is a parking lot. There's no reason there can't be apartments out there. I'm not taking the parking away, but all the projects we build are on podiums with parking underneath. We have a huge space behind the community center that we could own. You could easily put 40 units on that space and leave the parking underneath. We have spaces. If you brought a developer of any imagination to town and say, have at it, he could put 300 apartments in the downtown of Manchester. I'm not suggesting they do it, but we could. We do not have a shortage of buildable sites. We have a shortage of imagination.
Thank you, Gar. Thank you. Also, I think we're the only couple here. My wife Jane is here, and she's a more recent immigrant, so we can have her say something.
So I love the beauty of Manchester by the Sea, but I also love the walkability to be in a town that has a train station, a pharmacy, a grocery store. You know, it's like everything you would need, everything right there in those 3 or 4 blocks. And it's gorgeous. The fabric of the town it's exquisite. So I'm thrilled to be a newcomer and thrilled to have this conversation. It's great. Thank you.
So my name is Lauren and I own the Stock Exchange. I've lived in town for 5 years. This store has been where it's in the same place for 46 years. My biggest complaint for my customers would be parking, obviously. They just keep driving if they don't see a spot out front. And I know that we've all talked about this and it's an issue. One of the things I've asked for is lines to be delineated where the car should go, because I look outside all day long and the cars will be in the middle of a spot where 2 people could be. And I guess that this has been an issue before. People don't want the lines. I don't know why, because when the lines are there, I get more parking out front. And over by Madam Haddam, those by Stanley's, I think that whole line should be marked with lines so that people can even see that you can park over there. It just seems like very helpful. People don't know where to park. They park right in the middle. Takes up spots from the front and from the back.
Very good.
Hi, this is Amy Leach from Style Snoop. I would love to talk next if that's okay.
Sure.
I am sorry that I don't have my camera on. I've been driving my kids to their lacrosse all night while listening. And I need to go feed them dinner. So I'm on a little of a time crunch, but I firstly, I've been involved in the planning, the past several calls for this great project. So I know that I've gotten to share a lot before, but I just wanted to, agree with a lot of my peers. I own a ladies clothing store, I'm sorry, called Style Snoop. I am about to celebrate my third anniversary in Manchester. I also think the community is so charming and wonderful, and I love being part of it. I also love all of our restaurants. My family and I frequent them at least once a week. And I love supporting all the businesses in our community. Prior to COVID, the summer prior to COVID, I was part of a group that worked together to form a merchant group to bring the restaurants and the stores together to try to have monthly events. So I'm really hoping that we can bring that back post-COVID, because I know that my customers really loved it and I got a lot of great feedback from the community. So that's something that I think is important. And then of course, parking, I agree with everyone else. As Lauren said, I hear the same thing from my customers. If they don't see a spot, they'll just not stop. And then they reach out to me, oh, I was gonna come, but I couldn't find anywhere to park. And it frustrates me because I'm right across from the town hall parking lot. So I feel like we really do need signage, because even a lot of people that live in the community don't understand all of the public parking spaces that we have that they can utilize. I'm located right across from town hall, and on my block of Central Street that I'm on, there are actually 5 retail or service businesses and 2 restaurants, not including the real estate offices. So there are a lot of us competing for parking, and of course the people that are now coming back to town hall. So parking is definitely a challenge, and I would love it if we could somehow have better signage for the parking, directing people where it is. Of course, it needs to be, quaint and charming and not be obnoxious looking, but people really don't know it's there just by the single P, even though I know P stands for parking. I guess it's not obvious. And also last summer I was Amy from Mari and I spearheaded a map that the town graciously paid to have, the town found a sponsor for us to have printed this lovely map showing all the restaurants and stores in town and also our public parking spaces. So if any retailers would like any of those, I still have like 1,000 in my basement of my store. So please come get them, display in your store so we can support each other and show where the parking is. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. So thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you. Who haven't we heard from? Who's willing? Mary Ann?
Hello. Sorry. So I've owned, or my family has been in business in Manchester since 1991. And I'm sorry, the parking, I'm reverbing here. Parking's always been a little bit of an issue, but I was just actually chatting with one of my friends that every time I actually do go downtown though, and I go downtown quite a bit, I go to Crosby's, I go to Cal's, I go to Richdale, I go everywhere, I seem to get a space, which is nice. But I think it would be, sometimes I just feel like the community isn't really welcoming because of the parking. So, if you know where to park and you're comfortable, but I do feel like, that would be my biggest issue, is just making sure that there's public parking downtown behind town hall, or expanding it somewhere like that. Other than that, just making it easier for businesses to, get things done. I feel like, other than that, it's more just going through the process with just the bureaucracy of town hall sometimes, but that's my only issue. Sometimes it's different to be working in a town than it is to be working in a city. Like the consolidation of the government. But it's mostly parking.
Is the limitations at town hall due to staffing or regulations?
No, it's not, I'm having a very difficult time hearing you. It's just that sometimes it's easier, I think, if, and again, this is just the difference between a city and a town. Like having a mayor with a staffed office is very different. Right. I'm learning that as I'm doing things in other cities. But I can't hear now that I had to move away from where my computer was.
Oh.
All right. Sorry.
All right, we'll let you go. Thank you.
let Marianne know that we'll reach out and find out what the bottleneck is for her. And the only other business owner that we haven't heard from is Beth.
I'm
Just want to
here.
make sure she has a chance to speak. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Gibley. I'm the owner of Bravo Pizza on Beach Street in the Strip Mall. And I've been here, I'm sorry, we're in construction, so I have no real light fixtures here. So I am in my 4th year this fall, and it's been wonderful. I've been one of the lucky ones during COVID, and I did have to adapt and spend a lot of money and build out a kitchen just to keep up with the demand for other food than pizza. But parking, I don't have a problem with parking, but I see it, and I see the retailers that I know and all the other businesses do struggle with it, and you're working on it. I think that's wonderful. I thought possibly we use some of the larger parking lots like the high school and bring in some really nice trolley car that could bring the people downtown to do some shopping. That's just one thought. Then I thought about advertising, because I find that there are a lot of people that are still finding out that I'm here. They're still finding out that Manchester has such nice restaurants and great clothing stores and other businesses. So I hear that all the time. I had no idea it was so nice down here. So if we could maybe take out an ad in North Shore Magazine, if the town would do that for us, a full page, something like that, and create a really good social media platform for the town, then we could all take part in that too. I just think we need to let people that don't live in the area know we're here. That's one of the main things that I see. I think it's beautiful. I do agree with the public restrooms, because I think I'm second to Allie's Beach Street Cafe with letting people use our restrooms, and also trash barrels throughout the town. Really modern style trash receptacles, some that, for recycling, some for different things. I just always think that's a nice touch that shows that we are up with the times and we're really trying hard to keep it beautiful. Let's see, the outdoor dining I think has been fabulous, and I hope that everyone can keep their tables outside, because it does let people who are driving through town know that we have some beautiful restaurants. You can drive through town and not realize that our restaurants are filled with happening, exciting bars and people, and it looks sometimes like there's no one in any of them, but really they're busy, and they have some times that it's really busy on the weekends, but you can't really see inside, especially at Bravo. I mean, I've tried to work on lighting, and I will continue to do that. So I think that's it, just the social media and the website. The town website could be more exciting. Maybe we could hire a IT person. I don't know. Just make a better way for us to get our name out there in our downtown area.
We have a shopping center, and one of our tenants is Elliot Tadelman. And you may not know Elliot Tadelman, but you may know his ponytail. He runs a furniture store called Jordan's Furniture. He goes on TV frequently, and he brings customers to all of our stores because he's such a marketing genius. So what we need to do is put a ponytail on Federspiel and put him on TV and have him pull people into town. I'm in favor of that.
Gar, I think you've got the hairline that Elliot does, so
I
maybe
do.
you could do
I
the ponytail.
I've compared heads with Elliot, as a matter of fact.
Well, let's see your ponytail, Gar.
Well, I don't know, Becky. Long time
Jody
coming.
might not like it, but give it a go.
So I think everyone's had a chance to talk that wanted to. I haven't heard anybody talk about some of the things which the state says are important for a downtown, like more benches, more trees, fancier sidewalks. Is there anything like physical improvements that
I'd
really
be
need to
happy
be
with
made?
sidewalks that are not a public nuisance. And that if you're, over 70 and you have sometimes you shuffle a little bit, you wouldn't trip. We've got some trip wires in our sidewalks, and that needs to be fixed.
The trees tree roots battle with sidewalks.
Yes.
So it's kind of but in answer to the comment, Peter, regarding benches, we do have a very active group, which has been instrumental in putting many benches throughout the town. And they're continuing to do so. I'm sure the downtown area is on the list as well.
Right, obviously there's not a lot of space on the sidewalks for extra benches and extra trees.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think clearer signage, it would resolve that issue. I think we have ample public spaces. But directing people to those public spaces would probably resolve a lot of that issue.
Regarding signage, somebody needs to visit Richdale.
Sorry.
Sort of the theory that more signage is better.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Tiffany, I don't think we've heard from you.
Everybody, I'm Tiffany Marletta. I'm an employee of the town and I help them with communications, but I'm also a resident of Manchester. So I have a few different perspectives. I think, what attracted me personally, my husband grew up here, but I'm a transplant. The small town charm, the schools really attract families with young children. It's walkable, it has a safe feeling. From speaking with residents, personally, the outdoor dining went over really well last summer. I think most residents would like to see that came back. I think it created an extra sense, it connected the community more. You would take a walk downtown and people were just there and you could stop and say hello. And you don't get that feeling, I think, when they're behind the wall in the restaurant, but I do understand that there was a conflict with parking. So I do think it would be a benefit to find some compromise to work together to be able to bring some part of that back. My other thought would be the bumper season in Manchester. Just as a resident and an employee, I've noticed that we go into hibernation in Manchester over the winter, and just to get creative and find ways to draw people to come and visit our shops and restaurants. During the off season, we have no shortage of people, it seems, in the summer with the beaches open, but that's just been on my mind. But thank you. Oh, and one more thing. We do have a public bathroom in Town Hall, and maybe somebody else that works, one of my colleagues can confirm that, and I'm not sure if the front door is always unlocked or if that's contingent on Town Hall hours. So hopefully one of my colleagues can clarify. Thank you.
Make a sign for that.
Right, that's a good idea.
What about the community center? That has bathrooms. And I don't know what its use is during the weekend.
Yeah, it has quite limited hours, but
Yeah.
I think all ideas are welcome.
Yes, it tends to be a universal problem in every downtown. As you can imagine, everybody needs it at some point. Well, we have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any sort of personal priorities or what you think is really should be the focus of this effort going forward. Obviously, we talked about parking a lot.
So if I could jump in, this is Greg Feddersfield. I'm the town administrator. I've been here 8 years now. This is my third town that I've helped manage. Stowe, Vermont, and Lenox, Mass. were my other two communities. All three very different in some ways, but very similar in others. And all three certainly complained about parking, always. I would be curious to know from your standpoint, the 750 some odd or whatever you said was the number. Is that really a shortage of parking, or is it how we manage those spaces that we have? I think that's worth further exploring. I'd also love to further explore the concept of one-way streets and see how that can free up some space for us and improve the ambience of walkability as well. I think that's worth exploring. Erica had that idea of summer to, or school to summer. I don't know if it could be that long, but maybe at least the beach street from the hill to summer. In terms of restrooms, we had a proposal that we were advancing for a harbor master office and public restrooms at Reed. That didn't go over very well in the eyes of some. I don't know if that's worth revisiting or not, but it's certainly something that I'd be interested in hearing people's comments on. And I think building off of Tiffany's comments about the shoulder season, the winter, fall, winter, spring, is there an appetite for events during those times of years that would draw people in to the community? We don't need it in the summer. We have plenty of people in the summer. But is there an ability to have small special events? When I was in Stowe, people were always surprised to hear that the summertime was actually the busiest season. And that's because winter was great, but they worked very hard on the summer with special events. Now, those were larger events, and I wouldn't imagine that at all for Manchester, but smaller scale events. The small art show that's at Masco Park, or there's lots of different ideas that could be explored. And my last comment would be just, how can we do a better job of promoting local, so shop local. I think residents in town would be pretty receptive to a shop local campaign that was well done. And I can even bring some money to the table. So the ARPA money that we'll be getting soon is something that we could use to help do some promotion. And would love to talk about how we can best use those funds.
Can I just, I'm just going to weigh in really quickly, Greg. That is something I have definitely heard, and I would love to hear other people. The new docks, I heard from retailers in the summer before COVID that those docks that really brought in customers, they really did, they worked. And so the idea of the harbor master, I think it's worth revisiting the harbor master, harbor master's the visitors welcome center that would also have a bathroom. I think you could, have two things that accomplish there. And also for the events, one thing that the paper wants to do is we want to do pints and politics when we can all get together again.
That's a good place to end the conversation. We're going to be going back in a few seconds. So thank you for all of this spirited conversation.
Right? So that might be something we want to consider a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I guess I asked those questions because I just don't know how big we should swing. I mean, so Dylan, you just sent, I guess, right before the meeting or during the meeting, kind of your preliminary assessment kind of thing. And I see stuff like, let's revisit the boardwalk. Let's do decorative lighting. We talked, Peter talked about the power lines, and those are all would be great things to happen. They obviously come with a lot of coordination and big ticket price items. We have, Ken and the team doing a lot of that marketing and technical assistance stuff. I'm just wondering how we should, well, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but how big we want to swing for some of this. So some of the stuff those lingering issues like the boardwalk. I mean, we talked a lot about that, and we talked a lot about lighting and decorative poles and things like that on the street.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to be both strategic and visionary, right? To have a long-term view of what you really think is needed, and then some implementation items that you think you might be able to accomplish in the short term. So what I sent out to just, I guess I sent it to all of you, was a summary of what we've heard so far from people. So they weren't our ideas, they were what we've heard from people. Including the boardwalk and lighting and so on. So I think it's a both and, but I think we should start with coming up with a list of kind of all the long wish list, and then we're going to whittle it down to the top 5 or so project ideas. So when we do that whittling, we can consider the implementation aspect. That's most fundable.
Mm-hmm.
So, we shared a lot of more information about what we've gathered about these areas. How did that all sit with you? Did it seem accurate, useful, off-putting?
The only thing I was questioning was the parking. And I know that there's been a lot of parking study done on these towns, but 914 spaces, that in Essex, that seems like an awful lot of parking for a small town, and a big portion that's got to be the Woodman's lot, and maybe some other lots which really aren't public. They're a good portion of those lots are dedicated to those businesses. So it seems like it's a little bit of a misnomer. The same thing in Manchester. There's a couple of big lots there that are really for residents primarily and aren't for public. So I'm not sure if those numbers are entirely accurate.
Yeah, and we will break them out by public and private. I know that was on the Manchester slide. I don't think it was on the Essex slide. So the majority of the parking in the areas is private parking. Particularly in Essex, there's just the on-street parking and the parking by the ball fields. And you're right that I think a good percentage of the parking is in Woodman's lot, and then the study area also includes the shopping center up on Southern. That's probably got 150
on Eastern, yeah.
Eastern.
Eastern, yeah.
I'm
looking at the Nelson Nygaard study from 2016, and they counted 290 spaces at Woodman's.
Yeah.
And 89 at that municipal lot. And I'm assuming there's probably another close to 100 spaces on Eastern Ave. But 290 is a third of roughly what Ken just said, 900 spaces.
Yeah. So as with any place, there's both the number of spaces and then the utilization of spaces. And anytime you have off-street parking as your primary approach, you're going to have really mixed utilization, with some businesses not having enough and others maybe just having the right amount or maybe having too much. And I think Woodman's does do some sharing or leasing of their spots, right? So that's helping the matter. The ones that are on Eastern are pretty far from the district. I would guess they're somewhat underutilized, but they're certainly not within walking distance.
Not without taking your life in your own hands. I mean, that's not really the best stretch of walkway, coming from that Southern Plaza.
It's fine once you cross the street.
Yeah.
It's just the crossing of the street that's
right. Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah, we talked. we've talked about in previous meetings whether there are any other locations that would be appropriate for sort of a central shared parking lot with maybe some sort of shuttle that goes from it, which is that's a pretty huge expense, the shuttle. And it's something that's not, you might get a grant to pilot it, but you're not going to get a grant to operate it long term.
Right.
And even a pilot is going to be difficult.
I'm in the land of the pedicab right now.
Yep.
I mean, everywhere.
Right.
Talk about crossing the street at your own peril. That's what it's like down here. But that's, yeah, they're big into pedicabs, larger lots out further, and then you just start walking towards and you hop in. But you have to have bodies to
Yeah.
pedi. And that's even an issue for the Cape right now.
Right.
And sharing the streets,
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
which you take your life into your own hands here on 133. So
Yeah, and then there's the approach that they use in other countries or in some more urban places where it's basically like in Mexico they call it a colectivo. It's a van that you basically hop on and hop off. It's it's a taxi service, but it's a shared van that just goes back and forth on a route. I don't know if you guys have the volume of traffic to make that viable, the volume of parkers.
I don't think we would even know if we do. Because there is no, you know what I mean, outer parking realm where we've seen that as an option. Do you know what I mean? Like the idea of moving people, here's your parking lot. Now let's see, how do we move these people towards the walkability?
Donna, do you know, pre-COVID, just restaurant, let's just talk restaurants for a minute. Do you know what they were at for capacity in season? Were they?
You mean, were they turning people away? Were they turning tables?
Right.
I think at Woodman's that's hard to tell because, they're in a line and it's fast food basically, right? And so that table's turning over numerous times within a period of dining hours. Restaurants themselves, it's always plain weather there. And I think there's obviously days of the week where you're better, but there are also days where even in season, places found it that they could close early or, let certain members of staff go home, not have all parts of the dining room open. I mean, I think it comes and goes. I felt like in a fairly decent place prior to COVID. And I think it'll be like a boom as we all come back at first because people are going to want it so badly, right? You can't wait to get out and about, or at least I hope so. But then I don't know what will happen. And in a lot of discussions, places are worried that it's not going to be the drivability. Like we thought we would all rebound because people are going to want to stay close to home and they're going to do this and that. But remember that there's going to be the pull and dollars that other areas of the country or really large destinations are going to be cutting deals because they need it, right? They can't afford to go another season without it. So I don't know what's really going to happen in our little neck of the woods. But there's more concern being voiced than I thought there was going to be. I was on the rah-rah side, like, we're going to come in and it's going to go really well. And I still hope that.
I'm still feeling that level of optimism. I was at a ribbon cutting today at an inn in Rockport, and every innkeeper I asked there, and there were probably a dozen, said their bookings are all up this spring versus 2019.
Great.
And they're all local. They're coming in from Massachusetts and around New England. They're not getting on airplanes.
Good.
And you're right, Donna. When this thing really lifts, is the accommodation market going to get more competitive? Are the chains really going to lower their rates? And could that eat into some of our stays? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm so encouraged by the fact that this is a different market for us, at least on the accommodation side. And you know that the restaurants are doing well, but that's hard to gauge because the restaurants are at really reduced capacity. And I ate at Shays last weekend, and you know there are not many tables on the inside of Shays right now. But
That's right.
But Saturday they're laying full capacity in, as are most restaurants are going to go full bore. So that's when we'll really know what does it look like for our restaurateurs. So I guess, where do you want to take this, Dylan? Do you want to talk about some of these other things in here? Where do you want to take?
I think just to have a little bit of parallelness with the other group, I'd like to know, did we get it right? Did we get it right about, what's drawing customers to the area? What makes the downtown special? What the weaknesses and limitations are? Or is there something we're missing?
It seems pretty correct to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's coming from you guys, so I hope it.
We've talked a lot.
Well, wait a minute.
It's not all coming from you. All right. So then, one thing we haven't talked about is, where else do these customers go, and why are they going there instead of Essex? So sort of, what are the competitive advantages that other places have over you?
They have more, like Ken just hit it. You may have been in Rockport. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting it in. I mean, we do not have overnight accommodations unless you want to bring a sleeping bag. We just don't have it. We have two places, really, right? Unless it is short-term rentals. And last year, due to COVID, we weren't even allowed to have really short-term rentals. I mean, the Point, which is accountable for a lot of that short-term rental, they could not. I mean, the owners could be in their spots, but they weren't supposed to be renting. So hopefully this year that turns around, and we get some of that traction. But they come to town, they take a meal, they drive to the next town where they're staying overnight, and that's where the dollars are being spent. Okay, they're getting a day and a half of them. We're just a drive-through. So we need something that stops that drive-through.
I would say that we probably have the summer dinner down pretty pat, right? I mean, people know to go to Essex to Friday and to Saturday night. Yep. What else are they? I mean, you talked about Rockport. I mean, that's a whole thing, right? You could spend a whole day or days and not aiming for a small town and not even explore the whole thing. And you're doing it on foot, and you're doing it, in a very novel way, which we don't necessarily have at this point.
It was really too bad when we lost Erba.
Yeah.
Because, even though it wasn't a huge business, it was such a unique attraction, and people would come from all over to kayak downriver. And it's just a wonderful offering that we had. And I should love to see some more things going in on the water, like seeing SUP do more.
Yep.
On
I
the
think
river.
you might see SUP do more.
They sure have a big enough expansion to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of dangerous for paddle boards on the Essex River, at least on the main part, but there's other places they can get access, including down my road. But that's just, the river is such a draw, and the Great Marsh, that's what's unique about Essex, is the Great Marsh and the river. And that's what's so neat about Cape Ann, is each of the four communities are just so different and beautiful in their own way. And Essex uniqueness is the marsh and the river.
Right.
And the heritage that goes along with that, the shipbuilding heritage and the antiques, and then comes in all the restaurants. I just wish we could do more with the river. That we talked about that river walk downtown. I don't know if that's completely gone, but it would be neat to be able to have people be able to spend a little more time, having access to the river.
Yep. I saw that. Is Perkins renting boats this year? I thought I saw boat rentals.
He started last year, actually.
He did last year.
Yeah. I would say this, there's opportunity there. Like, Herba was one business. Perhaps somebody will come in and say, we want to do that. Or have something other than just the river cruise if you want to get out on the river, or, maybe somebody else will come in and pick that up and run with it. Kayaking is great. I mean, I think we should still be encouraging individuals to come because there are places to put your boat in. But we have to see how the town responds to that, because last year with COVID, bless you, they really pulled all of that back, right? You could be a local and go kayaking, but you couldn't come from somewhere else to go kayaking. And but that is a draw, like you said. A lot of people really depended on that. Like they would even drive in thinking that they could do it because it was a safe activity, and then couldn't put the boat in here.
I think last year they did let the kayakers put in, no matter where you were from, but they did at town landing, but they didn't let you as a non-resident put your boat in. Remember, there was a big discussion with Guy Bradford about that.
Yeah, I remember there was a big discussion.
And they allowed
they
allowed the kayakers, just not not using the ramp to put a boat in.
Put a boat in.
Yeah.
So
but you still have to find a place to park, and you still got to get kayak down
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
It's not that ease of, you hop in the Herba van, they drive you down to Canoma.
That's right.
You get in the, because truly, we've all been on the river when there are kayakers and stand-up paddlers, and it's tight.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a great experience. It's a great experience on a weekday when there's not a lot of boaters.
Right.
But
that's right.
It's really too bad that Cape Ann Sup didn't want to absorb the Herba kayaking business, because it's sort of a natural.
You could do they could do kayaking on the lake.
Right.
I mean, I think sometimes it's like, look, that lake is underutilized, peeps. It is a lovely area. And it might be something that we should be thinking about that, because when there are not ball games going on there's parking. It's not a huge amount of parking, but it is a grandparent who has to go and watch coach pitch, which can sometimes be. There's more parking there than you realize. And up above, and I'm seeing on Saturdays, people utilizing that now. They're going for walks, they're walking the woods, they're walking the trails up there. I mean, there might be something to build momentum in that way too. You have an ocean and the lake, right? And they are going to put kayak racks up there. So, I mean, there's going to be racks there as well.
Really?
So I guess we need to sometimes think outside the box of what what we're thinking. Bicycle riders, gosh, I can't tell you. It's like Tour de France every weekend now.
Another tight road.
Yep. But I
And-
love a good bicycle group because they stop and eat.
Right. They spend way more money than the average person in a car, a cyclist. They buy coffee.
Don't they? I mean, it's crazy.
Yep. That's a thing. That's a real statistic.
Talk about disposable income. They seem to have it.
Exactly.
Right. You're right, because they're sitting on those $5,000 or $10,000 bikes.
Yeah.
So they'll grab a beer or two and after their ride and hang out and yeah. I mean, I think the active recreation is pretty big here. But I think the river, compared to the other, if you want to compare to the other Cape Ann towns, I mean, the water is the access to the water is different in all the towns. I mean, Rockport and Gloucester and Manchester, you're in a harbor, which is completely different than the river, where you kind of have to meander out of town, and then it really opens up into this really you don't believe it until you actually are out on your first river cruise, the first time you go to Canoma. It's unbelievable, but it looks almost tropical, like the way it just opens up that way, but it's really hidden. And it's kind of like, well, I mean, I think probably a lot of people in Essex want it to be hidden, right, up to a certain point, but it's kind of like the best kept secret. So, I mean, I guess more access to the water would be important, but I don't know how you do it. I mean, I think I mentioned, painting. There's lots of the Cape Ann plein air. They go to the Cox Reservation, and they go to Cogswell, and that's also people who probably would spend some money as well. And that's a really nice, I mean, that's not heavy traffic, noise, craziness. People painting are pretty
I think Essex needs to enjoy a pivot towards more of the art and cultural way. We have a lot of great artists in town and have a very tight, you have sculptors, we have painters, photographers, all sorts of we have pottery, we have ceramic, there's a lot there. And so as we start to move forward, I think we should show that appreciation towards those people who have chosen Essex to make it their home. I mean, we have artists in residence now. I mean, there's programs that are going on in town where they're bringing people in and they're doing, scape studies of the area, and it's lovely. Yes, there is plein air, but there is more, there's day-to-day art happening in Essex. And I think that that's something that we should embrace.
I actually called Robin Cantor last week, just to kind of pick her brain a little bit. And we started talking about the artists in town and how many people attended. They ran like a seminar, I think, during the anniversary year. And we started talking about how we can maybe work toward a community event with artists in town as another community event, because that was one of the things in our study that people wanted. They didn't necessarily really want more restaurants and tourists, but they want more things to do in town, which naturally bring in tourists who go to the restaurants. So we talked a little bit about that, and I started making a list, and she started rattling off people, and I take pretty good notes, but I'm not that fast. And we talked for about an hour, so I'm going to circle back with her. I'm trying to build that business list that we talked about for the town. So and I think Gail, we talked to Gail about that when we stopped in to see her on our walking tour too. So it's too bad we don't have some type of place where we can have a permanent rotating display where people can come. We talked about if you go to a restaurant and you're on a wait, what do you do? If you had somewhere to walk through and see some of this and be able to purchase it or just view it or whatever, that would be great. I don't know where that is, but it's something to think, give some thought to, because you're right. People need something else to do while they're waiting. I think that there should be another river cruise right across the street from Woodman's. It goes right from there, and because I brought people on the river cruise who have boated all their lives on the North Shore, but hadn't been down the Essex River, and went on the river cruise, and they were like, wow,
Every time. Yeah, that's the
I mean,
reaction.
it's stunning, and they don't, and not that many people know about it. So, and it only runs, so often, but more of that. The river walk, the price tag on that was $1 million. What was it? I wasn't involved. So we talked about it a little bit at some meeting, and I don't remember what the price tag was before it got nixed.
It was the price tag, the state was basically underwriting it. It was not really a chunk of town money that was going to that. There was grants, there was opportunity, there was match funds. It was really nominal. The problem was getting all the parties that would have been somewhat affected in the sense of on and offs to sign off on it. And we just never got that totally together within the timelines of being able to take advantage of money and, you know what I mean? And people being pliable. So that's where our problem has fallen with that.
But there was still a price tag because, so what was the total price tag at that time?
I don't remember because it went in and out. It was like what monies, what grants, whatever was available at what time. So it actually has reoccurred at least 2 to 3 times that I can think of that it's come back to the table. With heftier price tags each time.
I mean, are we talking about something that's, so far out of the realm that we take that off the list because we don't think that the state's gonna have that kind of money for us? I think we're trying to, we need to be realistic too, because when we go back to our list, Donna, when we did the walk, I mean, lighting,
Should how about I share the list that I have right now and we can talk about it?
But can I, as we're doing this though, don't they have to match up with the other community? And I don't think that Manchester's looking to do a river walk. I'm just saying, I don't know what Manchester's power lines are underneath. They have the pretty lighting. They have the, let's be real. Where here are you seeing similarities, Dylan, since you can correlate and see the two at the same time?
Well, you both have, let's go through it and we can see them, because we've got ideas coming from both communities. And I don't want to kill things yet.
Oh, no, I'm not saying kill it. I'm just saying, do we then have to sell them on a river walk? I'm just trying to figure out what we have to do here.
Yeah, I mean, they don't need a river walk, but harbor access is important to them. They've done some dock improvements and people really like them and want more of them and see the value in that. And the businesses see the value in that as something else for people to do.
Well, they put in transient slips, which is something that we don't have. I think Perkins has a couple, but we don't really have that in Essex. And that was a big improvement in Manchester.
Right. So the first thing on the list here is shared marketing, training on social media, expanding events. Sorry, I dropped my pen. Expanding events during the shoulder seasons, creating some sort of business guide, coupon book. So there was ideas from somebody in Manchester of putting that at the MBTA parking lot, could go somewhere else in Essex, and posting maps of businesses and advertisements in prominent locations downtown. So that last idea is in a way wayfinding, making sure that people who visit the area who are there on foot know what else is available, which is important in both downtowns.
Right.
In some ways, it's more important in yours because you're more spread out. So those are some ideas. The shared marketing campaign, the training on social media. My question there is the Cape Ann Comeback Grant, is that covered enough to not be pursuing for this project?
No. Okay, so just in our conversations with that group, the shared marketing campaign as Cape Ann Comeback Grant is it's going to be one aspect, although we want it to be sustainable.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it will, and that is not actually reaching out so much on behalf of Essex as it is for all of Cape Ann, right? And because we've already named the demon in the room, which is we don't have any rooms, we kind of need to find a way to toot our own horn so that we either get people to come back after they stayed someplace else or whatever. So I think Essex could definitely use more marketing for whatever it is. And training on social media, yeah, there's going to be some of that through Blue Dot and making people aware and helping people get there. I don't know that it's something that needs to be done through this. I think that might be well handled with the Cape Ann Comeback.
And there's another element there, that's the business resources element,
Right.
Donna, that is separate from Blue Dot, that where we really want to try to offer that to any business who needs it.
Correct.
So I would agree that that would be, I think, less important for this one.
Right. That I think we're really going to have covered well, Ken. That end.
Okay. So I'm hearing that the shared marketing is still something that's a priority. And it sounds like, I mean, in part because the Essex Merchant Group has less capacity to do that shared marketing.
Now, does that mean that the marketing would be shared between Essex and Manchester as well? So you'd be marketing both communities? Or could you market one maybe differently, or just one versus both?
Well, I think
know?
yeah, I mean, that's a crucial question because you've got the Cape Ann Chamber marketing the whole area and people from both Manchester and Essex saying, well, but we want our own thing, right? So is there shared marketing that's like Essex and Manchester, or is it just some platform that's differentiated?
Well, I mean, the guidelines on this grant, can we split these things? Do we have to do everything for both communities exactly the same, or can we kind of mix and match?
So there are very few communities who are doing this kind of regional application. So what they say is that the recommendation should be shared by the community. But I think if you're applying for a grant and it's for shared marketing in two different communities, but it's basically the same thing and you're hiring the same consultant and they're developing two different products, to me, that sounds like one project.
Right. So I'm thinking of it, Ken, as your marketing is a weakness that we feel that we need to work on. Both communities agree on that. You're not going to try and sell a train in Essex or a ship in Manchester, but yet each community, do you see what I'm saying? It's like you're going to pick up when you're marketing for those towns and have recognized the weakness, the strengths that are there. So I think that we should be able to attack that.
Yeah. Okay. What do you guys think about expanding events?
I'm all for it. And we know that the town's all for it. It's the one thing that is consistent. It even came up in the public forum for housing. I don't know how, but I mean, they actually, like what makes your community, what is it lacking? I mean, it just keeps rearing its head. The people who live in town want more camaraderie and events that happen there.
Okay. And that's another one that's, has come up in Manchester as well. Okay, so circulation and parking, clearly you guys both have issues in this category. In both places I've heard expanding CADA, providing shuttle buses, providing shuttle that would connect to parking or connecting Essex to Manchester. Both places, the idea of off-site parking has come up. Wayfinding, I think, is an issue in both communities. Definitely. I went right up to where your municipal parking is and didn't know that that was public, right? Like we stood at the top of it and I didn't know it was municipal parking.
Yeah.
So then in Manchester, they've got, some issues related to on-street cafe spaces that I don't think you guys have, and some other specifics. And then that last one, again, you guys just mentioned of improving access by other modes of transportation. So better bike access, better boat access, a way to increase your customer base without increasing your parking demand. And again, that's something that's shared by both communities. And at least the complete street part ties into other funding sources.
Matt, can you answer the question about wayfinding for me in regards to the monies that we had for parking and signage? Because did we lose the rest of that money? Is that gone bye-bye forever? Or is there a chance that we can come back, circle back and get some wayfinding dollars?
I think there's definitely opportunity for wayfinding dollars. I mean, that's something you can always get money from the state through DHCD and their downtown initiative program, whether it's design or whether it's implementation. I'm assuming that's going to be something that we can get. And I think the shared streets program, you can also get funding for wayfinding right now too. I think we had allocated money at town meeting to do the striping plan, which had some limited wayfinding. But I think the issue with that was that we had to adhere to MassDOT standards, and they were like these big chunky like highway signs. They were
pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we're probably better off not going that direction. I mean, again, it's this whole relationship we have with 133 where the state has control over it and they don't really consider it they don't consider it like 133 in Ipswich or 133 in other towns where it feels like you're going through town. They still like it to be like a highway, pretty much. But I would say that there's no reason why we couldn't go for wayfinding. I mean, we've talked about it before. We never did a full out study, but yeah, I think that's a pretty easy one that we could tackle. And I think Nelson Nygaard had some recommendations as well to get people into that municipal lot. But I mean, I think that's a no-brainer to have on a recommendation list.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
We just took the webinar. I don't know if anybody else did, that was a specialty in wayfinding.
Yep.
And you can still get to it because they're taping all of them. And it was fascinating and wonderful, and it was exciting. And the different studies that they gave really came together with a lot of different ideas of what could potentially work for Essex. I don't think any of us want those big bulky green signs, or you know what I mean?
The brown,
Like,
I think they were brown. I think they were even better.
Yeah, they offered green and brown.
Was that Mark Faverman who did the presentation?
I don't know.
Wayfinding.
Oh, you mean
one of the people.
no, it was really the 3 companies that they had that did it. It was outstanding. They're stellar. I don't know how they got them to take time out of their day to give that webinar, but it was really great. You guys should take advantage and see it. I mean, it just gets the creative juices going.
Yeah.
And learning and seeing what a difference it made in the communities, having that signage. It's such a sense of pride. It's branding. It comes through in branding for the town. I mean, they don't look ugly. I mean, they did great jobs. People came together. And again, it can be difficult because you're going to have to go to the public and you're going to have to talk about what they think they want these signs to look like. But it really worked out well. And I just appreciated all the backstory that they gave to why wayfinding is that important. Like you said, Dylan, you stood at the top of the road and didn't know that there was a parking lot down.
Yeah. So what about, is there anything on this parking list that you guys think has legs? I mean, it seems like they're all kind of big ticket things.
Is it possible to do something with that one building that has been tied up forever in?
The purple one?
Yeah.
Falling down
It's
in the-
owned. It's
I know, but-
owned by someone.
Is it a money issue or is it a legal dispute?
Are you talking about on Main Street? Or are you talking about on Southern?
The corner right there, I guess it's Southern.
Talking
Yeah.
about the Bill
That's
Allen properties.
Oh,
I mean, that's a tax issue, and when and if it gets paid and the town takes it. I have asked about it and I was told that unequivocally it will be sold immediately, that we cannot own it. It's a dirty site and we cannot afford to clean it.
What about the one in the middle?
The purple building.
The
That's
purple
owned
building
too.
that's-
The one with broken windows now.
Yeah.
yeah, no, all of that. Yep.
There's
What?
a couple of, when we did our zoning study, there's a couple of parcels on that Main Street area that have significant acreage in the back. I don't know if it was the Purple House or there's a couple of them that have like 6 or 7 acres back there. I thought that was interesting because we started doing yields, to make sure that we were
Right.
calibrating it right. So all of a sudden we wouldn't see 30 houses back there. But I mean, there's a lot of land back there that's not utilized, and I don't know how to unlock it.
Land that's not wetlands, Matt.
Yeah, there's upland. Well, I mean, we did a very cursory look at it, but there's some upland up there. I mean, the Bill Allen property, it's nothing that money can't solve, right? It's just a matter of who's paying for it, right? I mean, people develop on dirty sites all the time. It's really understanding what it would cost and what the value of it is.
I mean, if you put a parking lot on it, what does that mean for development? Do you have to,
Right.
you have to clean it up if you're gonna blacktop it?
It's
Well,
less of a
not-
it's
You
less of a
still have to
cleanup than
do
it
a
was.
soil study. You still
Right.
have to
Right.
do a soil study. It's what's under it, not what's on top of it that is really, and once you get into it, then it becomes really murky because once you discover what's underneath and it's not good news, nobody else is going near it.
Yeah, I don't know
So
what's. I don't know what's coming out. I don't know what's in the soil, but I mean, I think to Ken's point, I mean, if you're not putting in a school or residential units or a park, it's not as much of a cleanup. You can cap it. You don't have to remove it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, Newburyport, we have dirty soil all over the waterfront park, and we're just going to put a couple feet of soil on top of it and call it a day.
All right, let's
Well,
move on from that one.
ask Brendan, because Brendan said absolutely not,
Yeah.
because it came up.
Yep.
Well, I'll talk to Brennan and you guys can talk to him as well. So moving on to physical improvements, and we only have about 4 minutes left. So in Essex, storefront improvement program, lighting improvements, as we talked about, it's a big ticket. Something about planting and maintaining the pocket parks, and then the other big ticket of the boardwalk, which seems like the one on the list that would be a game changer, right?
That would. I love the idea of trying to get some kind of arts and culture downtown. That just really resonates with me. You could really see Essex as a boutique community, small community, nice places to eat, incredible heritage, beautiful vistas, and we have no galleries. And it's so obvious when you think about it. And we have some incredible artists in town. Could we do a prototype on this and convert one of those abandoned properties and go ahead and put in some sort of arts studio or display? Can we get some of Chris's stuff in there and some others and get just a real mixture of town creativity in one of those empty parcels?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're about to knock a building down.
Which one?
Well, we're about to knock a building down. We're taking down the old safety building.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but crazier things have happened. And I mean, it could be really a great creative space. We have the old schoolhouse that is underutilized. It is a storage space for historical. I'm not saying you throw the historical out the door, but I mean, there is potential, but the town has to want it.
Can I ask about the historical? I mean, I lived there for a few years. I went to a couple of their events, and it's like the reluctant museum. It's really just like a clubhouse, right? It's like it's like to hang out, and everyone kind of tinkers, right? But it's not the last. It feels like the museum is the last aspect of it, right? It doesn't seem like they're really trying to get people to go there.
Well, are you talking?
I'm talking about the boat building museum.
The shipbuilding museum.
I'm sorry, the shipbuilding and the schoolhouse building. They're all part together, right? It's storage for work.
Yes.
I mean,
so the one, well, I'm talking about the one that used to be the next door to the old White Elephant, right?
Yeah,
so that's the building I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That would have the charm of a gallery, that lower level. It would have there's a lot of potential there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that could be done, but I'm interested in outdoor walkability art as well. I would love to see changing exhibits, right? So if Chris Williams wanted to, we could set him up somewhere and you could have a couple of the large sculpture, possibly. We could do something that works with pottery. You could do some of the plein air activity. You could have somebody else who's willing to do, a study where people would be invited to watch them paint.
Yep.
That type of thing. We did a thing at Woodman's where we gave artists chowder. They painted under the tent, and it was the best thing we ever did.
Cool.
I mean, it was hard for them to say yes to giving away free food, but I'm like, are you crazy? It's the people who are going to show up to watch the artist's work that are going to buy your food. And
right, we're going to end in 30 seconds. So I just want to make sure Jody's going to do our report out. And I want to make sure Jody has a sense of what to say.
Well, I think that marketing is our #1 need in Essex. We'd like to have some more community events, and particularly to tie in during the shoulder season. We've got parking and transportation issues. We need wayfinding signs. We still need lighting and pocket park improvements, storefront improvements. And we would like to incorporate something with the arts, and if it could be something ever changing and walkable, even better.
All right, cool.
That was perfect.
Sounds good. I knew you
There
did
you
great.
go.
That was
All
perfect
right.
30 seconds.
I think you have a good side hustle going, Jody, as a note taker.
Seriously, you better watch out.
That's, that's what they said at my old corporate job.
Good, good girl.
Are we supposed to leave now? Is that what we're doing, Dylan?
Yep.
Good talk, guys.
All right, so
left
we're
and just
done.
came back.
Did you really?
Oh.
All right.
See ya.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Lighting and decorating your building kind of thing, and really add some pizzazz in the wintertime.
That's a great idea.
Don't tell Manchester. Oh wait, they're all here.
That's like a classic downtown improvement district thing to do, right?
Yeah, totally. Yep. Lay it up, Essex.
Do we need to break out into 2 groups for another hour?
I think you guys had a much bigger group than we did.
Tell us all your secrets.
Well, we're going to share all the secrets and make them commonalities now. So I think that, so let's do that. So let's have Essex go first. And Jody Harris is going to do our report out.
Okay. So we felt that marketing is really our #1 need in Essex. We have things here, but people don't get to stay here because of our lack of inns, hotels, whatnot. So they go other places. We're interested in more community events, particularly to bring people in during the shoulder season. We have parking and transportation issues. So we're looking at how we can get people in, whether it's shuttles or offsite parking, provide more bike access or boat access. We need some wayfinding signs, and we've kind of circled around that twice. We want pretty wayfinding signs, not state signs. We need lighting in our downtown area. We lack any quaintness, if you will. And we're interested in incorporating more of the arts in town, and particularly if we can do something that's walkable and maybe ever changing to showcase some of the artists that we have in town that people really don't know much about. That's it in a nutshell.
Good job, Jody.
Anybody else from the group want to add something to that? Anything? No.
I think that's a really good summary.
Yeah. So I just want to say that the group we had has been involved in these discussions in the past. So some of the conversations about the existing conditions, we kind of skipped over a little bit and went to recommendations. But pretty much the group seemed to feel like what was presented was pretty accurate. What you guys heard from Manchester was pretty accurate description of Essex. With the exception of concerns about the parking map kind of overstating the availability of parking in Essex, because it's almost all private and a lot of it is concentrated in a few large lots. So what do you guys have from Manchester?
I guess I can summarize unless Sue, you want to.
I did not take notes, so go right ahead, Peter.
I will. Yeah, I jotted some things down. So I think everyone agrees on our take on Manchester as well as Essex as just being incredibly charming and really a special place. I mean, like the idea that you can live in this wonderful place with good schools, with great, its own train station, walkable, you have all the needs that you have in a small place, is really unusual. And obviously people put a value on that. I think other strengths, the beautiful walking environment, the sort of fact that you can get all your needs locally, and the restaurants and retail stores generally seen as great. Some of the challenges, which probably dominated the conversation, which is good. The need for bathrooms or the lack of bathrooms. The fact that People frequently, I guess you either have to go to a restaurant or go into a shop, and it's difficult to find them. And then parking really dominated our conversation. And to some extent, the conflict between the restaurants and the success they had attracting people to outdoor dining during COVID, and the fact that used up some of the parking created an issue for a lot of the retail shops. And so that was perhaps something that made temporary the situation worse, but I think from what we're hearing, it's pretty big demand for parking in the best of times. And part of the problem is a lack of signage. So like Essex, I think the need for signage directing people to shared parking, public parking, as well as to other venues. We talked about sort of the issue of benches and tree planting, and the fact that there's actually lots of nice open spaces with benches and trees already, but that's part of the wayfinding challenge, is how do you find those places? How do people sort of plan their visit? Like, I can imagine, you're walking around, you want to plan for, I could stop in this park and have a little rest, especially if you're an older person, and then know where you're going to go to get back to where you started. So the need for orientation signage came up, the need for parking improvements and better coordination, because one of the questions raised is whether there's really a lack of parking or whether it's just the management of that parking, and better sharing, better signage, maybe even better physical connections from one parking lot to another. And then it's raised by several people the idea of maybe other temporary improvements in the summer, like reducing some roads to one way to allow for both outdoor dining and a better pedestrian experience, but also have plenty of parking, to stay open late, to coordinate sort of late hours for shops and restaurants in the summer. And also has raised the issue of better coordination on the shoulder seasons, having more events that would draw people downtown when they wouldn't otherwise come, as they do in the summer. Anything else that I missed?
I would simply add that we did talk about the strength of having more residential units downtown as a source of constant support for downtown businesses.
We also talked about the use of media, that businesses would be interested in sort of perhaps a North Shore Magazine advertisement or something that the town perhaps undertook to do a media blast a couple times about the businesses.
Yeah, a question occurred to me, this is for both towns, is what's the best entity to take on the sort of media communications aspect? Should the towns be doing it, or should it be Merchant Group or someone else?
Is Ken still on? So
I don't think he made it tonight, did he?
Come on.
Hi, Ken. There you are.
Hi, guys. I think that's a tricky question. Part of it, as you know, as Erica certainly knows, is a lot of people look at one or two kind of media formats, and nobody looks at everything. So we try to hit all the media, the papers, the blogs, the social media, websites, with anything big. So any of the events, we put out there in all these different formats. So it kind of depends on what the town wants to do. North Shore Magazine is an incredible magazine. It also happens to be incredibly pricey if you're going to do advertising. Mm-hmm. The Cricket is extremely popular in town. Kudos to Erica, and we do a lot with her and the paper and on social as well. I think it depends on what you want to do, and we're happy to have that conversation offline to see how the chamber can help out in promoting anything that either community is doing. Mostly we're focused on business and community events that, you know, if it's sort of town policy and other things, we tend not to pick that up. We leave it up to the town or the papers.
I agree with that. And I would just say that in my experience, the best outcome comes when you have people working together. And that includes everybody at the table, whether it's the merchant groups, the town a little bit, and then the chamber for sure, and the media outlets, you know, distribution. Everyone working together is the best way to do it.
I mean, we talked a little bit on our end, you know, especially because we're joined together, Manchester and Essex, and going to the state. I mean, I think that there's probably an economy of both towns working with a consulting firm, and I think it's got to be a targeted marketing effort, just like how we're doing with Ken through the chamber right now. I mean, we're very focused because their towns do so much. I mean, no one really is going to care about, you know, the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes were released 2 days ago, but we're talking about like very targeted, like what are we trying to do now? Maybe there would be an economy if, you know, if we use one consultant, but maybe both towns had different focuses, because we're different in some ways and similar in other ways. But I mean, that would be nice for a you know, if there's state funding to be had, to kind of go together in on that, coming off of this rapid recovery.
Hello. I would also like to reiterate a couple ideas that were put out there about residential solutions to the downtown area and bringing more residents downtown, whether they're not parking related. And I think that would bring a lot to having people working, living in the downtown instead of just a temporary like seasonal solution, which, you know, I, of course, I'm looking to draw people seasonally, but I'm also looking to develop a downtown, you know, clientele, you know, like year round. And I think a couple of people had mentioned that, and that's a good long-term solution to developing a downtown area where people live, work, play, shop, etc.
We didn't discuss that tonight in the Essex group. I know it's come up in past studies in Essex, and I'm wondering, just quick hit, what do you all from Essex think about that? As
We're all done, right? Six years, we got our mixed use zoning. Isn't that it? Isn't that all we have to do? I feel accomplished.
It's a big win.
Huge thing. Huge.
And I think you just had a Manchester resident move in and create that. Isn't that a cuttlefish and above is a new apartment for Essex?
Yeah, that was pre zoning, but yeah, that's kind of the idea. more of that.
Kudos. I think it'll work well.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that there's some capacity for that in Essex, but you know, there is a limitation of what, you know, what's physically possible. But that's kind of why we created the mixed use zoning district, is to encourage that, and we created a housing coalition to talk about that as well. And it's, you know, housing is economic development is kind of the mantra that we, you know, working through the MAPC and CHAPA, you know, trying to make that connection. People will spend money in their hometowns, but you know, we have a lot of restaurants that have, you know, we have employee shortages, and it's difficult to get employers to get employees locally. So there's also that need to provide local housing as well. And that maybe be more on a regional basis, but certainly it would help to move the needle in Essex.
Right. So I'm definitely hearing some overlaps here. The ones I'm hearing is maybe housing, shared marketing, wayfinding, addressing parking, the need for additional events. So I think it's definitely a start. And we're also going to do more work on trying to develop additional recommendations coming out of this sort of diagnostic phase. So the next step for this process is Dodson and Flinker are going to continue to develop recommendations and run them by our committees, and then try to whittle those down to the top 5 recommendations. And we'll be having another public forum in about a month and a half or 2 months. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your time. and your wisdom and your knowledge and your love of your communities and your willingness to contribute to them. So thank you guys and have a great night.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.